Well, good morning again. It's Thanksgiving Day, and I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and to all your friends and family. What we have here today is a 390 that had a bottom end failure of some kind. We're going to find out when we get into it exactly what failed. The 390s, I've done these before. You've seen them on the channel. They're kind of like a big 372. And pretty much everything you know about 372 applies to these, just these are a little bit bigger. For that matter, a lot of the tools are the same as well, you know. And there's some crossover parts, you know, from time to time, but for the most part, things are pretty unique to a 390. There's things like the side covers are the same and stuff like that, but most everything else is a little bit bigger, a little bit different. So what we're going to do here basically is just tear it all the way down to the bottom, pull it apart, and one of the epiphanies in life for me, and I'm not sure everybody gets to the same place as I did, but it's been pretty clear for me for a long time that oftentimes the hobby of the saw, boat, car, whatever, at first when you're a young fellow it's about acquiring big, fast, new, cool. When you start having family and friends and then you start having people who come and go in your life, you realize what's really important is not so much the thing, the saw, the boat, the car, whatever it is. What's really important in your world is your people, your friends, your family. Those people who are in your life that in some way make your life more interesting and better, right? And it's so easy to forget that. And so I'm not going to go into some big long thing. But the one thing I will say is this. While you have a chance, you tell the people in your life that you care about them. Of course, the ones that you do care about. And the ones that you love, you tell them you love them. And you do it often. Not make-believe. But you do it fairly often, fairly frequently. There may be a time in your life you look back and said, damn, they left. I never had that chance, because once they're gone, they're gone. All right? Very, 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 very important. Very important concept. Got a couple people in my life that are going through some tough times. So prayers for their family and the members who are in trouble. Health issues. Look at that. This saw here just doesn't have a lot of time. So while this is a really, really cool saw, it's really just a saw. And that's about where I'm going to leave it. So back to the saw. The external clutch, a lot of this stuff is exactly the same as on the 372 in layout. Pieces like this crossover, right? He has an 8-tooth sprocket on this saw. You know, everything in there looks pretty normal and good. I'm going to have to rattle that off, so I'll go do that. I like to rattle that clutch off with things fairly free, where you're just using the weight of the flywheel, nothing like rigid, you know. So I do that just to try to stress the systems less, as I guess is the message. That looks pretty good. You'll see these things here worn right out. When you see that worn to where instead of having a protrusion, it's actually a groove, it's time to replace the worm gear. The other thing I want to say on that note of appreciation of people in your life. We've been doing this now for a few years, and we do have the subscriptions begin to climb in numbers. And I just want to say thank you to all the people who've come here and constructively added to the channel, been a part of this thing. And I appreciate it, and I'm humbled by how many people actually pay attention to what we do here. You know, just an old man, hobby saw, you know. That tray is kind of like a 372, but it is different. And you got the tank vent right here. You've got fuel line. Fuel line looks good. Here's your pulse line. Of course, here's your throttle. Notice it has the 2 anti-vibe springs here instead of just the one. It's got another positioning screw over here. Don't forget that. It has another positioning screw right here. See it? So you got 3 of these. You got 1, 2, 3. And then it should just come right out of there. Like that. It rolls right out just like the 372 does. And I'm going to pull the wire out. And there's your handle. The reason I'm taking this off is because of the plastic. And I'm going to cook this in order to change the bearings. Should it need it, of course. I'm not going to do it if it doesn't. All this stuff looks pretty good. Check this. One of the things I get a kick out of is they actually put a spot right there on the case where you can get underneath that spring and peel it out. Of course, got to take this off. By the way, this is the same as on a 372, isn't it? Let's see if this can be another Makita moment. I don't know if it will or not, to be honest with you. Look at that. And that's no strain or pain right there. That's easy on it. That worked beautifully. Okay, now this one here has got a washer. Do not lose those. I'd be a little more careful if I had a heated handle, because you don't want to go through the other side of the flywheel and damage the generator. You know what I'm saying? It's a coil underneath the flywheel. But in this case, I don't have a heated handle, so I'm going to run those right down, get as much thread engagement as I can. Looks like it's pretty well centered. Give a little bit of pressure. And they come right off. See how it goes all the way through the flywheel? So if you had a generator on the other side, you could potentially damage it. So you don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to immediately put the pull start stuff right back on this, so that I don't lose the little washer that goes underneath these. back together. Since this is going to go into a turkey oven, basically, you got to take off all the rubber parts, everything. We're going to pull this thing apart and heat it up and put new bearings and a crank in it and then build it back up. Is what the game is. But I've got all the rubber off. There's nothing left. Caps, little bumpers, everything that's rubber could be affected by the heat is off. Now, like the 372, we've got 6 K-screws. So this is ready to come apart. I'm going to heat it up just a little bit before I bust it apart. Here's my turkey. Let that heat up for a minute. So while that's warming up a little bit, take a look at what comes in the crank kit. Got one bearing. That's for the PTO side. And it seems like it's fairly specific to Husqvarna. I'm not seeing a brand on it. A 6203 C3 SKF. See, I've been using the 6202s from the same source that are made in Italy. I've been using them recently on the 372s with pretty good luck. So it comes with 2 bearings, a wrist pin bearing, or they call it a needle, but it's a wrist pin, and a crank. Isn't that pretty? Look at that thing. Very, very, very nice looking part. And there's your part number right there for those people who are curious about those things. It says made in Sweden. And this saw is getting not only a new crank, it's getting a new cylinder kit. Now I use the Husqvarna case splitter on these, and don't get mad at me, I'm just telling you, I've done it for a long time. And the reason why is I spread the section that goes down over the crank just a little bit on these. There it goes. There's really nothing wrong with that bearing at all. One of the things I like about this system right here is look where it hits when it squeezes. It's pushing on the bearing itself, not on the cases. So all that strain was between the bearing and the crank versus actually pushing on the cases at all. And make sure you do not lose the locating pins. You got one right here. You got one right up there. Now this crank, what happened, I don't know if you can see, but the rod bearing came apart in the darn thing. See how that rod bearing's moving? And a bunch of pieces got up and made a mess in the rest of the saw. So basically this person's getting a new saw. We're just having to assemble it here. But basically what I do is I take a scraper and I peel off all that gasket, and then I'm going to bring it into the kitchen and hot soapy water that case and clean it right up. And then it's going to go into the turkey oven, get up to 300 degrees, and we'll pop the bearings out and set a new set of bearings right in there, and then reassemble this whole mess. Alright, the gasket's off of these things. So I'm going to go wash them off in the sink, and then we'll put them in the turkey roaster. Fresh from the kitchen sink. So So we're going to dry them right out at 300 degrees. Here's a case half that's got a good bearing in there. And I measured that recess. 25 thousandths. That's about 50 thousandths protruded. And interestingly enough, I may end up using that to set that bearing in there, because this is what I use on the big Stihls, and that sets it to 50 thousandths. Alright, let's see what's for dinner here. That bearing's already coming out. There it is. I just popped that bearing out and popped the new one in. It just went in with my finger. I didn't have to do anything else. So now I got to chill it down quick. I don't like that bearing at all. It's a nylon cage bearing in that damn thing. And the one's going in there is steel. So they're replacing it with a steel bearing. I think that's a good move. Let's see what we have for this one. See that big old bearing's ready to come out of it. Yep. This here goes to the inside. That's the seal that goes to the outside. Now the other thing is this, is once you put that bearing in there, it's chilled right now, is chill those cases down quick on these. So you don't put a lot of heat into the plastic. I hate these things with a nylon all the time. I mean, I just don't like it. But that's where they are. Let's see if we have enough heat in there. There we go. Alright, I'm going to get this thing outside and chilling in a hurry. I used compressed air and I got it chilled down pretty quick. It bit hard, so I'm going to go right, get a little heat into this. I'm going to go right to cleaning up the case and right to putting that crank in. I use carb clean to get every little speck of oil off the sealing surface that I can. So while these things are just a little warm, that's why I'm going to put them together quickly. And I'm going to 1184 everything like I always do. So we get that going. Let's get this thing together as quick as we can. One, where are my locating pins? They're right here. Right? Get that out of the way. Other locating pin, right here. Inspection to make sure that seal is everywhere, and it is. I know we don't have the crank on yet, but I'll just get that tacked on. Now, the crank goes right on next. And remember, you got to check, make sure that you got that bearing in the right way, where the balls can be shown a little bit right there. That guy goes there. And use that, pull it on. Like with the 372s, I just sort of set these in there, and I just put a couple rotations on them, not because I want to tighten them, I just want them for alignment. So I'll just do that on all of them. Just a couple rotations. Since I have the seal out steel, I'm going to be able to push on the inside of the bearing on this one. So let me get the other tool on there, and I'm sorry you're not going to get a chance to watch me crank on it, but it's the same as I do everything else. No big deal. And everything's going together nice and smooth. And I see how I use those for the alignment pens. Almost got it all the way in, and I'm using these top hats so that it gets to the inner race of the bearing. So, well, I wasn't able to show you putting this one together, right? And it went together very smoothly. That crank is nice and loose. Those bearings are nice and loose. You can turn them with your fingers. One thing I find interesting is, take a look at that connecting rod. It's obviously quite a bit different than the one that came out of there. And one thing I like to check for is just make sure you see a little bit of the 1184 squeezed out of all the and you do. I think that set's ready to reassemble, right? Just start building it right back up. I think what I have is another set of cases that I'll just put the camera on and squeeze them together. I'd like to build a 390 for myself out of the junk pile, so I think I'll just do that. Alright, I've got an abbreviated version coming your way. I've had these laying around for a while. There's really nothing wrong with the bearings. I'd split it apart. It was really a 385. So I'm just going to put it back together and build a saw out of it. I was kind of planning to do that at some point anyway. So this is as good a time as any to put it together and maybe build a saw to pull a long bar, you know. So here's an OEM gasket. Of course, here's the 390 cases I just finished putting together with new bearings. Let me get a little bit of 1184 on these case halves. I like taking old saws and just making them run. But where I'm going with this is these saws and the boats and all the things that I do now are not as much about the mechanical device, not as much about things like the saws or the boats. It's a lot more about spending time with people who I care about. And as I had mentioned before, life is very short, so you want to do that as often as you can. And the saws, the boats, things like that have turned into more of a vehicle to share life experience with the people you care about than being all important in of themselves. If that makes any sense. On this Thanksgiving Day, I have a lot to give thanks for. I really do. And one of the things that's most important in my life is some of the friends I have. and I get a chance to spend time doing stuff like this, you know, sharing life with them. Now what I do is I start dropping in these screws, PDQ, you know, for alignment purposes more than anything else, and I think I had mentioned that before. Once I have a couple of those screws in, that's when I set up the crankjack. In this case here, I'm going to set on the outer. I'm not going to pull on the inner radius because the seal is already there. So basically I'm going to go to the cases. And start pulling it together. This is really going together pretty easy, and most times it does. You basically just run it down until it settles in there and comes to a stop, you know. And that's really it. I'm going to check the seal and make sure it didn't prolapse. It didn't. I put plenty of oil in it. Right, what I have going on here is I'm going to have to heat this case up a little bit over here. And I don't think the bearing on this side here is protruding enough. It turns pretty stiff. That's too stiff for me. I'm not happy with that. So, and just put the whole thing right in the oven for a little bit. Turn it down. I'm going to put it in the mid 200s. Alright, seeing as this crank is not as free as I like, and I suspect it's because this side over here is not where it's supposed to be, I just set that in the oven and got a little temperature on it. And what I'm going to do now is put my puller with the recess 50 thousandths. And give it a little bit of a pull. And just a little tension. Just a little bit. Not terrible. And I'm going to simultaneously give a little bit of a tap on this side and see if we can't make that whole thing move over just a little bit. My hunch is it will now be free. Now it's the way it should be. That's the way it's supposed to be. And yes, I moved the bearing just a little bit. And I did it with this recess, right? And then I pulled on the crank and gave it a tap. But these cases have got a little heat in them. So, and if you look, the crank is fairly well centered, and it was not centered before. So that bearing right here on the PTO side, it's really critical to get that out far enough. And this tool right here I built for the Stihl 660. It seems like it's the right thing. So here's another set of cases ready to go. Look at that. That's nice. So hopefully that was educational. You know, and that's also why I like using these tools, because it can do that type of task. You know, post cases being together, you can go back and adjust the bearings with these bushings, you know, where they're supposed to be, and that's nice. So we're going to build this one here too, right alongside this other one. But I just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and as I said in the beginning, I just really appreciate the fact that you guys hang around. Look at that connecting rod versus the new one. I like that new one better. I'm jealous. This guy's going to get a new saw with a new crank that looks cooler than mine. But what was I just saying about stuff? Does it really matter? Not really. So, let me give this a final crank and see if the crank stays free. That one needs a little bit more. And it does. So this is good. We're done. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. That was today, but